Hello, I hope you're well. This video is inspired by the most recent video by Paul, an adult with autism, which is in response to an article by Suzanne O'Sullivan, who specialises in neurology. And in this video, I'm going to respond in particular to a very short video I found on YouTube in which Suzanne O'Sullivan talks about autism in a rather negative way. And I apologise in advance that this video is going to be quite negative and snarky, and I've been criticised for that. I understand why you would criticize me for being so negative, snarky, but it really is coming from a place of challenging ignorance about autism and sticking up for autistic people. I can't resist challenging people like Suzanne O'Sullivan, who so clearly misunderstand autism and misrepresent us, and I'm just not having it. So I appreciate that it's not pleasant viewing at times to watch me get cross about things, but I'm not just going to talk about the fun things about autism. I'm not just going to ignore the stereotypes and the negative comments from other people. I'm just not going to abide it. If I've got a platform, I'm going to use it. So the first thing that I'm going to draw attention to in the short video that I've just mentioned is this quote from Suzanne O'Sullivan. "This romanticized view of what a mental health illness is." So what is this mental health illness that Suzanne O'Sullivan is referring to? I'm a bit concerned because the video that I'm drawing attention to is about autism. I hope she isn't assuming that autism is a mental health illness, because it's not. She then says, "I look after people with severe autism." Now, this is the crux of my complaint. There is no such thing as severe autism. I worked with autistic adults with learning disabilities and conditions such as epilepsy 20 years ago. It was a small home, a residential home for 6 adults, autistic adults with learning disabilities, and some had epilepsy. Not at any point during my time working there did anyone use the term severe autism. So why is Suzanne O'Sullivan using that term? Why are so many other people using that term, severe autism? Autism is not a linear spectrum that goes from mild to severe. She carries on. "The voices of the severe or moderately severely affected people with mental health and learning problems and behavioural diagnoses are not represented on social media, where you see people celebrating being diagnosed." What does moderately severely affected mean? That's just nonsense. What does that mean? So that's the first thing to challenge. She talks about people who are autistic, who have learning disabilities and other conditions possibly, as not being represented on social media. That's not true. Go on YouTube, type in autism. You will find lots of videos about autistic people with higher support needs. They're there. They might not be creating the videos themselves because of their learning disabilities and other challenges that they have. But there are videos about autistic people with higher support needs. They are there, they exist. So it's nonsense to claim that people with higher support needs who are autistic are not being represented or not having someone on their behalf articulate their situation. And celebrating being autistic. How dare she bemoan the fact that people celebrate their diagnosis? How dare she? Prior to my own autism diagnosis, I was suicidal. I wanted to not be here anymore because I assumed that I was a broken version of a normal person. I assumed that I was broken. So to find out that I'm autistic, it allowed me to accept myself for who I am, which is a perfectly valid autistic person with my own combination of autistic traits. So I'm not mildly autistic, I'm not severely autistic, I am uniquely autistic. So to criticize people like me for celebrating their diagnosis is outrageous because it's a hugely important event in someone's life. Now, I didn't actually celebrate. I didn't have a party. I didn't get the party poppers out and crack open a bottle of wine. I was perfectly neutral at the time when I got my official diagnosis outcome, because by that point I already knew that I'm autistic because I'd researched it for months. I'd watched many YouTube videos. And that's one reason why I make my own YouTube videos, because I'll someone might stumble across me ranting or making silly jokes and think, actually, I might be autistic like that guy. And it's a revelation, a belated revelation. Why shouldn't someone celebrate that? It's hugely important. It can help someone realize that they're not broken and that they deserve to be in this world. So I'm not having it, Suzanne O'Sullivan. It's not for you to criticize people for celebrating their autism diagnosis. She then says, and I think that there's a real tone problem there. We have a tone problem. You are speaking on behalf of autistic people as the neurology expert, and you're speaking about autistic people in an extremely negative way. So I think the tone problem belongs to you. She then says, if you're celebrating being diagnosed, then there is a problem because the concept of all these diagnoses is they are supposed to be diagnosed because you have an impairment. So once again, she's framing autism as a bad thing. Severely autistic, bad. I had an ADHD diagnosis. I received an ADHD diagnosis the year after I received my autism diagnosis. I think it's a very common story, very common sequence of events. An autistic person having researched autism in depth, in true, I would say, autistic fashion. We like to get to the bottom of things. We like to understand things in depth and truly understand what we're talking about, what we're reading. I can't understand my own sentence. Anyway, unfiltered video. And when people are reading, when autistic people are researching autism, they might come across talk about comorbidities or co-occurring conditions. And that's exactly what happened to me. I began to deviate into reading about ADHD. Like, why are autistic people talking about ADHD? And then I realized that I have ADHD as well. Now, for me, ADHD is a disability. I find it incredibly hard to focus on what I should be focusing on, like my day job tasks. I get them done and I respond to deadlines. I work well under pressure, but that's self-imposed pressure because I postpone things because I struggle to focus, and my ability to prioritize what needs to be done isn't the best. I really wish I could prioritize tasks a lot more effectively than I currently do. So I find ADHD to be disabling. But so it's an impairment for me. But autism for me is not. It is not an impairment. It is a lens through which I see the world. Now, as I've said in the previous video, and I will continue to acknowledge, sensory overload can be disabling. Absolutely. Loud noises, for example, bright lights. I completely recognize that. That can be disabling. But for me personally, ADHD is disabling, and autism, whilst I have some sensory challenges, audio processing can be hard when there are multiple sounds at the same time, hence multiple. But for me, ADHD is disabling. But, even if you do consider yourselves to be disabled as an autistic person, it's the emphasis on impairment that Suzanne O'Sullivan and many other people choose to lean on. It's an impairment. It's a bad thing. That's the tone that I'm getting. Certainly when I watched that very short video, it was an edited version of a longer interview. So this is just my take on things. You might absolutely disagree with what I'm saying. But I feel very, very strongly about it. It's the most irritating 2 minutes I've spent on the internet watching that edited version of Suzanne O'Sullivan's interview. And I feel so strongly about it, I'm making this runty video. And if you don't like what I'm saying, watch another video, watch Paul's video. Anyway, Suzanne O'Sullivan then says, I think there's too much of a relaxation of that requirement of the diagnosis, so that people are getting a diagnosis without having the level of impairment that really deserves a diagnosis. Deserves a diagnosis. I deserve a diagnosis because I'm a human being. Is that good enough for you? And, has Suzanne O'Sullivan ever heard of the autism spectrum, where people have their own combination of autistic traits? She appears to think that, you have to be on the imaginary severe end of the spectrum, a spectrum that she appears not to have recognized. You need to be on that end of the spectrum to receive any sort of validation, any support. No, it is a spectrum. So accept that people within that spectrum, wherever they may be, whatever combination of traits they may have, they deserve their diagnosis. They deserve to know who they are, and they deserve to have that diagnosis, that validation, so that they can seek the appropriate level of support that they need. This narrative that only severely autistic people are deserving of support, are deserving of that validation, is outrageous. It's divisive. And at the same time, she castigates people like me for our tone and for muddying the waters of autism. It's absolute hypocrisy. And it's not fair, hence the video. She also says, this is a medical problem that causes serious difficulties in life. No. Not for me. Autism is my neurotype. It's the lens through which I see the world. I was born autistic. I am autistic. Do I consider myself to be a walking medical problem? No. Being bitten in the bum by a dog is a medical problem. Probably a good metaphor, actually, because it's an external influence on me which causes me to have a medical problem. People who pathologize autistic people who look through their own neurotypical lens of superiority, they're a problem. They can cause people to be very depressed because their superiority, their false sense of superiority, their undeserved sense of superiority gives them permission to bully and mistreat autistic people because they have this perception that one neurotype is more superior to the other. I'm better than an autistic person. No. So, but with that attitude that unfortunately the person I'm talking about has, autistic people can become extremely depressed and anxious, and those are depression and anxiety are medical problems. They're not you. They are problems that you've acquired due to an unaccepting world and potentially violent external influence in the world. So it's outside of you that's causing the problem. It's not within you as an autistic person that is problematic. So that's a really tortured way of challenging that statement. But here we are rambling on as usual, or here am I rambling on. So anyway, Susanna Sullivan also says, it troubles me that a medical concept was created to help a set of people who really need that help terribly badly, and that it is being co-opted by people who are not significantly impaired. But firstly, autism was written about in a diagnostic manual which had its origins in diseases, and autism is not a disease. So that's the first thing to say. But, Susanna Sullivan appears to think that autism is on a par with a disease. It's not. It's a neurotype. It's not something you can catch. And then she has the audacity to claim that people like me are taking attention away from autistic people who really, really need support. We can coexist in this world. Autistic people with higher support needs can have support, and so can autistic people with lower support needs. It's not a trade-off. It's not a competition. Why does she have this idea that by me and others advocating for ourselves as autistic people with support needs that are fewer than autistic people with higher support needs, we're somehow being extremely selfish? No. We can all live in this world receiving support at the same time. So, we're not taking attention away. And that's an argument I've heard several times on the internet, and it's an argument that I remember Mike at Autistic AF challenging extremely articulately, as he always does. So go and watch Mike at Autistic AF for a more in-depth, more eloquent counter-argument to the arguments that people like Susanna Sullivan are proposing. She also says, those who think they have a superpower trivialize the disorder for the people who really need the support. Am I trivializing autism, which is not a disorder? It's a cognitive difference. It's a neurotype. It's a way of being. Am I trivializing autism? No, I think this is my 100th video, albeit some of them are live streams. If I was trivializing anything, it'd probably be in the moment and then I'd forget about it. The fact that I've devoted quite a huge chunk of the last 2 years to making autism videos suggests that I'm not trivializing autism. I really care about autism, about being accurate about autism, and I care about autistic people, not just me. So the idea that I'm trivializing this so-called disorder is, again, outrageous, and taking away support from those who really need it. Greta Thunberg is autistic. Now, she claims that her autism is a superpower. I don't think autism is a superpower, but if you want to call yourselves, if you want to label your autism as a superpower like Greta Thunberg does, then go you. Fine. Greta Thunberg literally risked her life to give support to people enduring a genocide in Gaza. So I'm just going to put that one out there. Greta Thunberg is literally giving support or trying to give support to people less fortunate than herself. So that's a pretty tortured comparison, but I'm making it. People like Greta Thunberg, like myself, we are not taking support away from autistic people who need more support. Okay, I've already said it, I'm saying it again. So to conclude, there is ignorance and there is severe ignorance, and I'm here to challenge it. And there are much more eloquent, much more effective, much more popular YouTubers out there, autistic advocates, advocating for autistic people in other ways. There are lots of people, an increasing number of people, I would say, who are challenging the severe ignorance about autism. But we have so much work to do. If you look at the viewing figures for some of these videos, that talk about severe autism, it is utterly depressing. But severe autism is not a thing. Mild autism is not a thing. Autism is a thing. Autism plus learning disabilities is a thing. Autism plus learning disabilities plus epilepsy is a thing, for example. Why use this shorthand, severe autism, which just gets lots of people confused and people like me very cross? Are you saying that my autism is lesser than someone else's autism? Are you saying that I'm less valid as an autistic person than someone who has higher support needs? It's absolutely outrageous. And yet here we have a neurologist who's got lots of books, lots of platforms to broadcast her inaccurate messages. And here's me in a tiny corner of the internet saying it's not on. So if you agree with that or not, let me know in the comments underneath. Email me. If there's something I missed out, let me know. Be kind. I'm a sensitive soul, as you can tell, otherwise I wouldn't have made a video like this. Be kind to each other, take care, and I'll see you for the next video. Bye!